to the sustainability team for asking me to come and talk about resiliency and sustainability. These two topics go very well together, and I'm really happy that we get to bring this together because we need our well-being for the planet's well-being. So we are going to be talking about some practical techniques and behaviors so that you can enhance your ability to deal with worry and anxiety and build your resilience. And hopefully we'll take you from the worried, anxious face on the left side of this screen to the starry-eyed, smiley face on the right side of this screen. If not immediately today, then with a little bit of practice. Now, to start, we're going to talk about some resilient thinking skills at a very individual, local level. And then we're going to talk about how this might work in some bigger, broader pieces. I do want to preface all of this by saying I work in organizational development at Human Resources. If there is anything that you want to talk about with me later, please do feel free to email me, contact me. I'm very happy to share further information or resources with you. I also want you to know that I am not a psychologist. I am not a clinician. I am not a counselor. And we do have access to employee and family assistance program and lots of other great resources should you need to talk with somebody about further worry and anxiety of any sort. So I'd like to start with this beautiful calming picture of sunflowers. And the reason I'd like to start with sunflowers is, first of all, they're just connecting with nature can really help us calm down. And there's a lot of great research about the healing and calming power of nature. But I also pick sunflowers specifically because I like to remind us that, like sunflowers, we are a part of nature. Sunflowers have this wonderful property where if you've seen a field of sunflowers over the course of the day, you will see those big, bright yellow heads shift from the east to the west as they track with the sun. And sunflowers, like a lot of things in nature, have a natural tendency to turn towards things which are bright, which are warm, which are life-giving. And so it's really important for us as well as we think about our resilience journey to pay attention to those things that are bright, that are warm, and that are life-giving, and to track them and to spend time with them like sunflowers track the sun. So one of the things that we can certainly do every day is to pay attention to what is working well, what is going well, even in these very difficult pandemic times. Even in these cold winter days, today is especially cold, even though the sun is out. It certainly is a chilly one out there. And so just an invitation that if there's nothing else that you remember from today, it is to concentrate and focus and deliberately pay attention on things that you find life-giving and affirming for yourself. With that in mind, I would love for you to engage a little bit in this webinar. And please put into the chat box, what are some of the first words or phrases that come to mind when you think about resilience? What is it that you imagine, that you equate this with? Let's have some things come into the chat box. And Amy, you can let me know if things are coming into the chat box. I'm not sure I can see it.
Yeah, so we have a few comments in the chat box. Are you able to see the comments at all, Lisa?
I am not this time. I remember we had that when we were practicing. I could sometimes see it and sometimes not. So
that's okay.
If you could read them out for me, that would be great.
Yeah, no problem. We have persistence, recovery, not giving up, overcoming, fortitude, strength, renewal, coping strategies, elasticity, and gratitude.
Oh, excellent. These are really great words and phrases. Yeah. Yes to all of that. So thank you very much for those who shared. There's a couple of different ways that we're going to use resilience today, and I think you really captured them in what you put into the chat. So the first way we're going to use resilience is our ability to bounce back from setbacks. So you're coasting through life at, let's say, a 7 out of 10, things are going just fine. Something happens, it knocks you down to a 5 or a 4, and eventually you bounce back to a 7 out of 10. That is what we typically think of when we think of resilience. However, as some of you have mentioned, there can be more to resilience than just getting back to where you were. There is this notion that we can grow in the face of adversity. We can get better as a result of adversity. Those challenges can make us stronger. And what the research shows is that resilient people think differently. They have a level of psychological capital and mental toughness that enables better performance, better leadership under stress. And because of the psychological research, and I'm going to give you a few references and resources as we go through, we know how those people think. And we know that when we look at people who seem to be naturally resilient and we ask them, what are you thinking? What's going on in your brain? What are the stories you're telling yourself? And then we teach that to other people, they also can develop those same resilience skills. So even if you might feel like you are not naturally resilient, or there are some situations that you just find really difficult to deal with, what I'm going to teach you today and some of those thinking techniques can certainly help you develop those resilience skills. Now, there are some myths and misconceptions. There are some things that we think are true about resilience and they just are not. So we think that resilience means always having it together. That's not true. Resilient people cry, resilient people lose it, resilient people blow up, resilient people can have the full range of emotional expressions. We might think that resilient people have all the answers, and it's not true. Sometimes resilient people are at a loss for words, or resilient people don't know how they're going to act. And we might think that resilience is something that you're either born with or you aren't. And again, that's not true. As I said, the research shows that when we learn about those resilience skills and we teach them to other people, those other people who tend to feel less resilient can become more resilient. Resilience is a skill and it is a practice that we are all capable of developing or enhancing. The truth about resilience is that it doesn't matter how many times you fall, it's about how many times you get up. And we know that resilience can be messy. So, would love to hear some thoughts from you in the chat. Why do we need resilience, especially when it comes to sustainability? This isn't just a resilience webinar, this is a resilience and sustainable living webinar. So why do we especially need resilience when it comes to sustainability? Give people a moment to put things into the chat box. And for whatever reason, Amy, I can actually see the chat box now. There's this magical hack that allowed me to see it. All right, so absolutely true. There are no quick fixes. The weight of the world can absolutely be daunting and overwhelming. And yet we want to persevere, right? We want to keep going. We want to do what we know is right for ourselves, is right for the planet, is right for every living creature on the globe. It can be overwhelming. And it can be overwhelming knowing that not everyone is working together. Yeah. And that facing this hard reality that we may be feeling very doomed right now. This is a big problem. Sustainability is a big problem. And we know that humans are using more than one planet's worth of resources in order to sustain our current way of living and our population. Like, this is big. This has been going on for 100 years. It's not going to go away overnight. So not only do we need resilience to cope with the magnitude of the problem, we're dealing with a very long timeline here. This is not something that we can say, okay, you know, I ate my salad one day, now I'm good for the rest of my life. We need that resilience to keep going over and over and over again. And that's hard. If we don't have resilience, we're going to find it really difficult to persevere. We know that there are three general attributes that empower resilience. Yes, genetics play a role. Now, we don't know how much, it's probably about 50%. And so I'm not going to get into the genetic side of things. It's about the same amount of genetics that influence your optimism, influence your IQ. It's that whole nature nurture piece. There might be some genetic predisposition. However, what we're really going to focus on, we'll touch a little bit on your support system. Resilience is not an individual sport, it is something that you do with other people. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how you think. So, the first thing I'd like you to do, I invite everybody to get something that you would like to write on, pen, paper, your tablet, your phone, some sort of notes app. And the first thing I'd like you to think about is who is there for you as part of your resources when times are tough? Who is it that can help you be more resilient? Maybe specifically around climate issues, but maybe even generally. And so think about who you might turn to in the work world. Do you have colleagues? Do you have a manager? Do you have peers, direct report, friends at work? How about in your personal life, your own friends and family, for example? Professional services that you have access to, counselors, therapists, psychologists who you might pay for some of the services or who you tap into for their professional expertise. And activities. We know that there are activities that we do that help us to be more resilient, like going to the park with your really cute, adorable puppy and kicking a ball around. So I'm going to give you a moment just to write down and brainstorm for yourself who or what can help you be more resilient when times are tough. Just take a quiet moment and write down some ideas. Now, if you would like to, feel free to put some ideas into the chat box because it might help other people think of who some of those resources might be. And otherwise, you don't have to put anything into the chat box, but you can keep brainstorming for yourself as well. All right, seeing a few ideas come into the chat box, getting outside into nature, talking with family, friends, teammates. Yeah, one of the things I think at the beginning of this pandemic, people were talking about a social distance, and I really wish they hadn't used that phrase because what's really important is a physical distance, but we can still say socially connected to a lot of these people who are very important to us. And in fact, it's really important that we do. And a mentor. Mentors are great to have. Absolutely. All right, so thank you. Please remember, you are not alone. There are always resources and support to reach out to. Yeah, and Dave, what a great point. Reach out to some friends I haven't talked to in a while. Yeah, it's really easy to reconnect with people. And we do have a little bit of extra time on our hands possibly. So that is a great idea. All right, let's talk about resilient thinking skills. As I mentioned, resilience can look very messy. It may involve falling a lot, but if you get up more times, you are resilient. The concepts I'm going to share with you come from Dr. Karen Rivich's book called The Resilience Factor. I did a master's degree in applied positive psychology about 11 years ago now, and Dr. Rivich was one of my professors. I'm going to share with you a very, very small part of what she covers in her book. So if you are interested in more resilient skills, I do recommend her book. It's an excellent read. All right, I'm going to put you into a situation, and I am going to ask you to put some responses into the chat box. So let's imagine that you have an important Monday morning meeting. You are standing at the end of your driveway waiting for your carpool to arrive. It is drizzling. You have your warm and toasty travel mug, but you do not see your carpool and you are starting to get anxious. Then your phone buzzes. There's been a mechanical issue with the car. They're going to have to go back and get somebody else's vehicle. They'll be there in about half an hour, maybe more. Sorry about that. In that moment, you realize that you will be late and very rushed without adequate preparation time for your meeting. So I want you to picture yourself standing there at the end of the driveway or on the sidewalk. Your carpool is not showing up. You are starting to get very anxious about making it to this meeting. In the heat of that moment, what are the immediate thoughts that are going through your mind? Let's see some things come into the chat box. All right, feeling stressed, absolutely. What are some of the words you are saying to yourself in that stressed moment? All right, we've got someone who's immediately weighing their alternatives. What are my alternatives? Uber, friends, can I call in a favor? A cab, unable to think clearly. Yeah, it's okay, my colleagues will understand. Some anxiety, what am I gonna do? How's this gonna work out? What other heat of the moment thoughts are going through your brain? Anyone starting to spiral down into despair? Yeah, thank you, Morgan. That's very honest. A little resentment, very true. All right, there is a range of thoughts in there, and I'm sure there are some people who are too polite to put into the chat box what they are actually thinking, right? This is a family-friendly show after all. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be going on through our brain in that immediate heat of the moment. Now, after we finish getting over some of those stories, we might move into some problem solving, but there is an immediate something that is going on, and I want to pull that apart a little bit to help us be more resilient. So I'm going to teach you an ABC model. The A is the activating event. It is the adversity, it is the thing that happened. B are the beliefs, what you say to yourself in the heat of the moment. And the C are the consequences. They're what you feel and what you do or say as a result of those beliefs. So let's pull this apart using this example. So in our example, the activating event is the challenge. It's the thing that's going on. Who, what, when, where, but not the why. We don't care about the why. We want just the key facts. So who is involved? In this case, it is you. What's going on? You are waiting for your carpool. When? It's the Monday morning before an important meeting. And where are you? You're at the end of your driveway, standing there in the drizzle. So we're not trying to solve anything at this point. We're just trying to identify what is the challenge, what is the adversity, what is the thing that has just happened. Now, the beliefs are the story that we tell ourselves about what's going on. They are the unfiltered, in the heat of the moment thoughts that our brain just automatically spits out. So a few examples that came up. You might think, I should have taken the bus. You might tell yourself, this is a nightmare. You might, with that resentment piece in there, Fred, the carpool driver, is always late. I won't rely on him ever again. Or you might get really resentful. I am not paying for my share of gas if they can't be on time when I need it. Or you might think carpooling was a dumb thing to do. I should have just bought a car. Right? These are the beliefs that are going through our head. Now, these are not the same as feelings, because our feelings come as a result of the beliefs. So that falls into our consequences, the C part of the ABC model. Consequences are your emotions and your actions, what you feel and what you do, including what you say. And they are directly tied to those beliefs. For example, if you thought carpooling was a dumb thing to do, I should have just bought a car instead, how might you feel? Let's put a few things into the chat box. How would you feel if this was your thought? Let's get a couple of feelings coming into the chat box. Feeling, of course, I made a dumb decision. Yeah, we'd be feeling pretty stupid. We would be feeling pretty down on ourselves. We might be feeling very upset, right? Any other feelings? What might we do? What might be an action? If you thought carpooling was a dumb thing to do, I should have bought a car instead. Why did Jerry convince me to do this? You might never carpool again. Absolutely. You might start going to the used car sites on your phone and start scrolling through all those places you could buy a car, right? You might start doing some financial budgeting to see, can I afford a car here, right? You might install Uber. Yes, you might do that as well. What is it that you might say when you get into the carpool? Like they're going to show up half an hour late. You get into that car. How are you going to act with your carpool buddies? Any thoughts? What are you going to say when you get in that car? By that point, your coffee's going to be cold. Yeah, you might say some unkind things, feeling irritated, feeling annoyed. Like, hey, do we need to pay extra for this carpool so you can keep your car running, buddy? I hope they bring cookies. Very stressed. Absolutely. There's a lot going on here. And yet, as being people who care about sustainability, we know that we want to be doing good for the environment. We know that we want to be able to overcome stresses and challenges so that we can keep doing the right thing. So if we stay irritated, if we stay annoyed, if we stay stressed out, we're not going to be able to take those resilient actions that we need to for a sustainable future. So those consequences, those are emotions, like how you feel, irritated, annoyed. Those are the actions, what you do and what you say. So I'm going to install Uber. I'm going to scroll car sites. I'm going to maybe snap at the people in my carpool. Oh yeah, and a really good point, Susan. I might not have even gotten into the car. I might have sent them a snappy little text, don't bother, and I'm going to go do something else. That's when I call the taxi or the Uber or whatever. Yeah, so we have options. Our beliefs lead to consequences. All right, so we're going to ask you then, and Amy is going to work some magic to put you into small groups. Let's say groups of about 4 or 5 people, Amy, if we can do that. And we're going to ask one person in the group to share a recent, vivid, specific event that caused some sort of stress, anxiety, or counterproductive thinking. And it doesn't have to be something big. It doesn't even have to be sustainability related. Just what's a recent time that you have been really frustrated and you told yourself a story about a certain situation that you recognize now was counterproductive? we're going to have everybody else see if you can figure out what the activating event is, what the beliefs are, and what the consequences are. So Amy, are we able to put people into a breakout group for, let's say, 3 or 4 minutes? All right, any thoughts or comments on finding the ABCs in frustrating events? Easy, difficult?
It was actually quite difficult for us to think of ones. And the actual act of having to think of an event caused us to activate an event. So we had a little bit of a moment.
That's
what to do.
That's actually a really good moment. Yeah, I was the activating event, giving you guys instructions.
I was in a breakout room. I was like, "Got your camera on." Okay.
Yes. So the activating event was we got instructions to think of a stressful time. The beliefs are, oh my goodness, I can't think of a stressful time. This is really hard. And the consequences are people got stressed.
Pretty much.
All right. Excellent. Learning in action right there. Any other thoughts or questions that came up from any of the other breakout rooms? And feel free to throw something into the chat if you want, or come on audio. Any other thoughts or questions that came up? Because I'm going to take you just beyond the ABC as the next part. I'm going to say what to do from here. So if there are any questions about the ABC, those would be good for us to figure out. All right. So what happens by the time you get through the ABC is you might be feeling kind of the bottom of a well. Like, all right, so I did and said and felt some really bad things here. Now what? Viktor Frankl, some of you may be familiar with Viktor Frankl. He was a psychologist who survived concentration camps, and he spent time observing people in those concentration camps, even as he himself was a prisoner there. He wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I would like us to take this space between stimulus and response and really expand it and insert some resilient thinking in there. So we're going to add on a D and an E to the ABC. So remember, A is the activating event. It is the bad thing that happened. It is the facts of the case. B are the beliefs. These happen really fast. What do you believe or think to be true about the bad thing that happened? And then we have the consequences. What happens as a result of B, the emotions or the actions or the words. Now, if we can move to D, D is the disputation. We are essentially going to take our brain to court and challenge those beliefs. So we're going back to B. We're creating a little bit of space in there. We're going to challenge those beliefs. And there are essentially 4 questions that we can ask ourselves to help challenge those beliefs. The first one is, what evidence do you have for your belief? How do you know, is this true, or is this just a story that you're making up in the moment? And we all make up stories in the moment. We can also ask ourselves, what are some alternatives to your belief? What are some other ways of thinking about this? Now, our original belief might be correct. So then we want to ask, what are the implications of that belief, even if it is correct? We believe this thing to be true. It is true. So then what? If we want to keep living a sustainable lifestyle, so then what do we do with this belief? And what is the usefulness of holding on to that original belief in the first place? So, for example, let's go back to our original belief. Carpooling was a dumb thing to do. I never should have agreed to do this. I should have just bought a car. What sort of evidence do we have that carpooling was a dumb thing to do? In that moment, not very much. We are feeling upset. It is drizzling. That's probably not helping our state of mind. we have an important meeting, we're very stressed out. I mean, this is not the time to make that blanket assertion that carpooling was a dumb thing to do. What are some alternatives? Well, we might think that I should have planned for an emergency Monday morning meeting, and maybe I should have found another way to get to work. We could think that I really enjoy my carpool because I like the people that I travel with, and bonding with them at the beginning of the day and venting to them at the end of the day is one of the best parts of my days. Like, yeah, there are some frustrations, but boy, on the whole, this is a really good thing for me to be doing. So we can generate some alternative stories. Now, let's say the implications are true. Let's say that carpooling, it is not working out for you. You sit there and you start thinking, actually, carpooling has caused me a lot of problems, and I get very stressed out about the carpool. Maybe you don't like the people in it. Maybe it hasn't been all that reliable. Maybe you're having to walk to an inconvenient place to meet your carpool. It's like, okay, carpooling was not the right choice for you, and you still want to have sustainable living. So then what? All right, well, as a lot of you put into the chat box, there are Ubers, there are other friends, there are buses, there are other alternatives. Maybe you can bike. Maybe you start up your own carpool and invite other people into it so that you're the one behind the driver's wheel. There are some other ways that you can move forward. And finally, what is the usefulness of holding on to this idea? It's not very useful. The reason I have a picture of a well here is because when you're at the bottom of a well and you're feeling really badly, is not the time to be making big life decisions. You want to get resilient first, and then when you are thinking more clearly, that's when you can decide how you want to move forward. And that takes us to the E part of our model. With the E, you can move forward with better energy, better thoughts, better feelings, and possibly a more sustainable action plan and commitment. So let me just pause there and see if there's any questions, anything coming into the chat. All right, I'm not seeing anything in there. So this helps you move into that resilient thinking space with your A, B, C, D, E model. Now, there are a few ideas here that we encourage you to do. The Sustainability Office encourages you to do some of these great things. So use the campus organics and recycling programs. We all know that's a good thing to do. I'm going to ask Amy to put you into groups. And Amy, they can be the same groups if it's easy to just kind of push the button on that. And I would like you to pick one. Just think in your own mind, what is one of these that you find difficult to do, that maybe when you think about doing it, it causes you some stress, or it causes you some anxiety, or there are things that you think could go wrong. So for me, example, number 3 is a big one for me. It's winter. I probably wouldn't cycle anyways, but I live in a place in Kingston where I could feasibly cycle to work. But I have a lot of stress around doing that. I'm worried about traffic. I'm worried about potholes. Kingston isn't the greatest at putting up cycling paths and keeping them clear and free of debris. I'm worried about what happens if my bike breaks down. I'm not the most mechanically minded. It would be really hard for me to fix that. I'm worried about showing up at work hot and sweaty and grimy. Like, I have a lot of things that I worry about could go wrong with cycling to work. But now with the ABCDE model, I can dispute some of those stories I'm telling myself and think more resiliently about this activity that I might want to undertake. So think about one of these that you would like to do more of. And then I'm going to ask Amy to put you back into groups and talk about some of these ideas and how could you use a resilient thinking model to help you think more resiliently about this. Any thoughts or questions from the breakout group?
No, I think we had similar anxieties, which was interesting.
Which one did you end up talking about, Lynn?
For me, it's the energy use that unsettles me. The technology, and Tess agreed, that having to get your house retrofitted and all that kind of stuff, finding out the information and not knowing a lot about mechanical systems, so it's kind of overwhelming. And then for all of us, right now during the pandemic, especially shopping local, because it's so easy to order things online from these big places and have them delivered right to your door, and a lot of places you don't know if they're going to be open when you get there, unless you have to do a lot of research to find out what their hours are and what their pickup is, if it's curbside or so definitely those two things for our group.
Great, thank you. How about any other groups? Any comments or thoughts from the breakout groups? Conversations were okay?
I'll talk again. Shy people. We did this. We did two. The same. Shop local was one concern for us. Similar concerns. One other concern was the additional travel and time commitment that was required. And the other one was planning meatless meals, which just changing cooking. This was mine because changing cooking is anxiety ridden for me anyways. Maybe the children won't eat it, maybe they'll hate it, maybe I'll poison them, this kind of, I've never done that. I need to establish that my children are still alive and I've never poisoned them. So
congratulations on not poisoning the kids. Well done.
I gave myself a badge of yay.
Although if you were going to poison them, at least it would be organic poison, I'm sure. So
exactly. Soy-based poison. And I guess in our resiliency pieces of those, the D and E were planning. The giving yourself the time and flexibility and forgiveness for. So what if I fail?
Yeah, there's lots of experimenting that can be done. Absolutely. All right, great. Any other thoughts or questions from any of the breakout groups before we wrap up? Let me just check the chat box. Looking pretty clear in there. Okay, so let's just do a quick nod to climate anxiety, because I think it's important that we recognize nobody has an anxiety-free life. Anxiety is a part of being human, whether that's about the climate or anything else. It is important to connect with nature, even when it is feeling like minus infinity out there. Being out in nature is good for you. Practice breathing, meditation on a regular basis, calm that parasympathetic nervous system. Our breath can help us in the moment. And of course, look after the basics. When you get good sleep, when you drink water, when you eat whole healthy foods, that nourishes your body and that is good for your mental well-being as well. If all else fails, try going off of news and social media for a while. I know that can feel like quite a privilege, but really news and social media are designed to suck you in, and bad news gets shared much faster and much further than good news. So just don't listen to the news before going to bed. Remove the Facebook and Twitter apps from your phone. Just if you can't handle it, don't go there. Do take small positive actions and help other people. Shovel somebody else's driveway, for example. Just do something good for somebody else. That can help with resilience and climate anxiety as well. When you change what you can, it increases your sense of efficacy and your sense of agency, and that can help you to be more resilient. Remember, think globally, but act locally. Those little small things that you do every day are making a difference. And in forums like this, connect with supportive and positive other people. Remember, resilience is something that you do with other people. It is a collective. Reach out to friends, families, counselors, your dog, your cat, other people, and other living creatures can help you alleviate some of that anxiety. And of course, you do have access to the Queen's Employee Family Assistance Program, Talk with a Professional. Today, of course, is Bell Let's Talk Day, so I think it's especially fitting that we are talking about this today. If you are looking for resources, there are lots of them online, and this hashtag can help you find some of them as well. So I want to say thank you very much for being here with me today. Thank you for participating in the breakout groups, and I hope you got to meet some interesting people. We have a couple of minutes if there are any questions. Anything coming up for anyone? And feel free to just take yourself off mute. Any thoughts or questions? All right, I am not seeing any. So if you do have any about resilience, please feel free to reach out to me and contact me. If you have any specific questions about sustainable living, reach out to the Sustainability Office, and I will turn it over to Amy for any closing remarks.